Right, hello, welcome back. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Right, before we start, I just wanted to touch on something, and this is for all British folk who may be listening. In the news right now, there's like this manhunt for an acid attacker, and it's like when something's plastered all over the news, I immediately smell a rat, like immediately. And I know people might say, "Oh, Stevie, you always overthink things. Everything's a conspiracy." But this guy seems to be gallivanting all up and down London, and there are more cameras in London than there are people. So how's this guy evading all of London, the London Metropolitan Police? It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. And another thing I will say, for all you doubters and scoffers and mockers, is that have you ever watched these CCTV programs where they have the CCTV center in like shopping centers, or on a Friday night in uh, like a main high street clubbing district, where they follow people after they've had a fight, and they literally follow people like miles down the road. People are halfway home and then they're getting picked up by the police because the camera followed them. Or some guy urinated in a shop doorway, and then he gets caught halfway home, off just getting off the bus and everything. But yet you can't catch this guy who's supposed to have done some serious acid attack. They really think we're stupid. It's over. We all know, like, you're the fake stream media. You are the fake news. Just stop it. Stop it. Unbelievable. Anyway, let me just get on with this. Otherwise, I'll start ranting about the GP. Go online, go online. Why am I going online? Why do I have to make a phone call when you're just around the corner? Oh, we'll give you a call. What do you mean you'll give me a call? My ears are blocked. Okay, chapter 11, Soul Harvest. 6 months. It's not much time to reach 500 million people, is it? John Dorman was talking to Raimi Straight as they wing their way from London to Johannesburg in South Africa. But Raimi's head was in a cauldron of other thoughts and emotions at that particular moment. His mother, Irene, as he now called her, had not taken his departure well. I think that's weird, people who call their mum by like their first name. I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I mean, I don't mind my nieces and nephews calling me by my first name. They don't have to call me uncle. But your own mother, I can't. That's just weird. His mother, Irene, as he now called her, had not taken his departure well. She didn't think he was ready for such a task. But Rayford, Raimi liked the idea of his parents being spiritual brother and sister. Rayford had defended Raimi, reminding Irene of how much the boy had matured in the past year and a half. Raimi felt sad for Irene. He knew that he still secretly felt like the little boy that she imagined him to be. But he was also thrilled about being trusted by his father with so much responsibility at such a young age, and he wanted to prove himself worthy of it. Here he was, only 15 years old, and acting as technical advisor to one of the world's 12 tribe judges. Who could have believed that the spoilt little brat who whined and at the slightest inconvenience prior to the collapse of America was now an important leader in a worldwide religious movement? Rayford's words came back to him. You can do it, Raimi. As long as you remember each step of the way that you can't do it, not without God's help. Help me to remember that, he prayed, for about the 100th time since he had been designated to travel with John. John Dorman had never had children of his own. He had never been married, but he liked Raimi, and he showed a genuine concern for the boy's welfare. That was one of the factors that promoted Rayford to release Raimi into John's care. Together, John and Raimi had been given the task of finding 12,000 genuine believers in the countries that made up Southern Africa and West Africa. John's commitment echoing inside Raimi's subconscious finally caught up with him, and Raimi responded, "Yeah, it's a very big job, isn't it?" he said. "But we can do it, remember? We can do it. Just as long as we remember we can't do it without God's help." John nodded in agreement, paused for a moment to ponder the truth in what Raimi had just said, and then went on. "I have some ideas, Raimi," he said, pulling a small notebook out of his shirt pocket. "I want to get your thoughts on them." One of the things that Raimi liked about John was that he treated him as an adult, at least when it came to spiritual matters. Since John had learned to listen to others, he regarded Raimi as he did the other members of the 12 tribes, as a spiritual brother. John's plan, as he explained it to Raimi, was to set up 4 separate bases in Johannesburg. One for translators, one for teaching, one for printing and distribution, and finally an administrative communications center where he and Raimi would work. "Sounds good to me," Raimi said. "But it could take us 6 months just to train our first set of workers." The former Jehovah's Witness missionary lamented, "And we'll need hundreds of teams like that before we're finished." "Remember what what Rayford said about us just being judges?" Raimi asked. "I think it means that we don't really have to teach anyone. God will teach them if we just sort of make ourselves available." Raimi patted on the briefcase he's still holding in his lap. In it were the studies that Rayford had sent with each of the 6 teams. "There's a lot of good teaching in here about listening to God and about listening to one another. You remember how you guys learned so fast from each other and when you stopped being religious. We just got to get him to do that too." John didn't want to say anything to discourage Raimi, but unless he could duplicate Rayford's Big Bang, as the group had come to call the explosion in Neville's living room, he was doubtful about his ability to get people to stop being religious. As Raimi so aptly put it, he too whispered a prayer under his breath. They were met at the airport by 2 married couples and 2 single men. Moses and Rebecca Malongu were in their late 20s and had 2 small children, 6-year-old Lebo and Miriam, who had just turned 1 year old. Ringo and Sylvia Laka were a middle-aged couple from Nigeria, but they had travelled to Johannesburg to link up with the others. Abdullah Ibrahim and Marcus Peterson were both single, both from Johannesburg and both in their 30s. Only Marcus was one from Europe. The others were all native Africans, and each had some knowledge of at least one native language. When everyone had been introduced and a few comments had been made about the flight from London, they climbed into 2 vehicles for the hour-and-a-half drive to the communal apartment where they were all living. On the way, John and Raimi learned that all 6 of the new recruits to their tribe, the tribe of Manasseh, had sold their possessions and put their wealth into a common purpose. They had just moved into a 3-bedroom apartment which Abdullah, a government scientist until a few weeks ago, had previously been living on his own. John was keen to get started, so when they arrived, he launched straight into a business meeting, starting with questions about how the believers would represent several different denominations and religious backgrounds, were dealing with their differences. Some problems were there on starting. confessed Abdullah in a strong Indian accent. I'm not going to do the Indian accent. We were 7 at first, but one woman was going when things were not as she wanted. See, it's hard to read because it's doing Indian accent. Allah showed me too. Allah showed we too would end up like her if we did not listen to one another. So that's what we did. We simply listened. John looked over at Raimi, who just smiled knowingly. Well, thank God for that, he said. Now, if we can just find 11,992 more recruits like you in the next 6 months. Rayford had concluded that the temple in Jerusalem was going to take 220 days to complete, and he believed that it would take an equal period of time for each of the 12 tribes to come together as well. The others listened intently as John explained this theory to them, and they were too overwhelmed with the task that had been set out for them. John then went on to explain his plan for 4 bases in each major city. Fortunately, there was more than enough cash from what each had received from their possessions to rent 4 apartments, buy a truck, and get the press rolling on literature. That's a lot of money, like people just selling their possessions. But I guess it's gonna take something like it would take something like that to happen for people to really start believing, especially for people to start selling their possessions, selling their houses, selling their cars. Because right now people think they're like, oh, I don't know, like the way I see it, a lot of true believers, especially the House of Israel, a lot of us, we're just getting by in life. And like, we may sow at our churches, we may sow to certain ministries, but you know, and here in this book he's describing it like people could just sell their houses, sell their cars, and like people who have these things, it's going to be very hard for them to let go of them. Which is why I personally believe is that believers who don't have a lot to lose, they're the ones who have a lot of work to do. Because people, they're definitely going to find it hard to let go of these things they've worked for all their life. This is when real tests are going to start happening. That's what I said, like, just wait it out, and we'll see who's who. We'll see who's who. You never know what's going to happen and what's going to happen to who. So I pray for the strength that I don't let down the Most High. If He chooses me to do something, no matter if it's great or small, that's in my prayers. I just hope I have the strength and the courage to just do it. It was agreed that the apartment already being used by the local team would become the administrative headquarters, where John and Raimi would live and work. Abdullah and Marcus volunteered to start immediately with translating. Between them they knew 2 tribal languages, Afrikaans and Arabic. If they should need a rest, or if they were needed elsewhere, there were others in the team who could do translations in still more local languages. Moses, who had been previously appointed as the group's accountant, agreed to locate and rent 3 more buildings and to place orders for literature in English straight away, while printouts in other languages were being prepared. You see, these people should already know scripture, like it's just, or have some understanding of scripture. And personally, like, things are going to just be done. Like I think things are going to be on instinct. We just getting home. Like, as I've said before, like, prophecy is prophecy. There's nothing we could do to change it, but there's you can't focus on it too much, because the order of things and how things happen, the speed of things happen, we can't get focused on that. We going home. That's all we need to know, really. It's going to be hard. There's, if you're reading, you just know. Ringo produced a notebook with the names of contacts the team had already made before John and Raimi had arrived. He and his wife Sylvia took upon themselves the responsibility of inviting these contacts to move into the education centre as soon as they had done, and to start learning the ways of the life of the 12 tribes. Sylvia reminded them that the woman who had left and threatened to make trouble for the group, she asked how they would protect themselves from recriminations if other members backslid and turned bitter. Apart from leaders, there is no need for people at one base to have information on other bases, Abdullah said. We can work in cells. For members and leaders, other names will be used. That way, even if they are tortured, they will simply not be able to give information. Again, John and Raimi exchanged glances as they observed how they themselves were little more than catalysts for something that was running of its own steam. Well, at least of God's own steam. Within 2 weeks, all 4 spheres of operation were up and running. 4 others had moved into the teaching centre where Ringo and Sylvia were acting as instructors. One of the new recruits possessed knowledge of yet another tribal language, and that the others did not know. And so he had been designated to join the translation team as soon as he had finished the basic training course. Master copies of audio compact discs and printouts of key articles by Rayford were already being produced at the translation centre by the end of the 2nd week. That is when the first order of literature arrived at the distribution centre. An order for another print run. This one in Afrikaans was placed, and it was due for delivery the following week. Moses was now out shopping for a 4-wheel drive vehicle to be used. For a 4-wheel drive vehicle to be used to deliver literature to more remote areas, as soon as the new recruit could be trained to do that. In a matter of weeks, the whole process would be repeated in places like Accra, Cape Town, Harare, Monrovia, Kinshasa, and Lagos. It was Raimi's job to answer the mail, and he was already receiving letters from people in South Africa who heard of the Jessen website and wanted to adapt their lifestyle. It was also Raimi's job to keep Rayford informed in England of what was happening. His regular epistles served the double purpose of putting Irene's mind at ease about his welfare. What was happening in Johannesburg and beyond was not unlike what was happening in other cities where tribal judges had landed. Rayford had made contact with his counterpart in the Eastern Hemisphere, a man named Chaim Rosenberg, who was based in Sydney, Australia. Chaim was in his 60s, and he too had commissioned 6 judges. Seeing as this book is kind of from Australia, I think this writer's kind of put himself in there as one of the characters. Chaim was in his 60s, and he had 2 commissioned 6 judges. They were to cover all of Asia and Micronesia. The 6 Eastern judges were based in Sydney, Tokyo, New Delhi, Karachi, Beijing, and Hong Kong. Over the next 6 months, the number of members in each of the tribes increased roughly threefold every month. They worked quietly, trying not to arouse attention. The rest of the world was so intoxicated with a philosophy of love and peace at that time that they hardly took any notice of the 12 tribes' activities. Even in countries where missionary activity had previously been outlawed, there were only cursory attempts to stop them when they pasted up posters in the middle of the night, or when they undertook other activities to alert believers to what was going on. But although the doors were open, not many were walking through. They still only managed to find about one soul in every 50,000 who was prepared to meet their standards. What they were fashioning was obviously going to be an elite team of spiritual commandos who would be able to give godly leadership to the world in what was soon to become the darkest period in Earth's history. End of chapter. Zion Ben Jonah writes, Rayford's calculations were based on two passages from the book of Daniel and the Old Testament. One predicts a period of 7 years between an agreement that results in sacrifices resuming in Jerusalem and the consummation or end. The other predicts a period of just 2,300 days from the time the sacrifices begin until the sanctuary is first desecrated and then cleansed. The difference between those two figures, 2,520 days and 2,300 days, is presumably the time it will take to construct the temple. Daniel 9:24 to 24 to 27 is so written that it could be referring to two parallel agreements, one between the prince of this world and his followers, and another between the Prince of Peace and his followers. One results in a physical temple being built, and the other results in a spiritual body coming together miraculously. But in either case, something horrible happens in the middle of the last 7 days. 7 years, sorry. Something terrible happens in the middle of the last 7 years, resulting in an abominable desolation being afflicted upon both temples. Like I said, I don't teach prophecy. I'm not a teacher. I'm just somebody who likes the Bible. And also, like I say, I trust teachers who I listen to, but as you can see, this is from a certain point of view. A spiritual body coming together miraculously. It's like we already know. We already know. But like I said, why I'm reading this is not about prophecy. You shouldn't be focusing on prophecy. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? You should be You should be fixing your life, getting your life together. Because you can't outrun prophecy. All you can do is make sure you're on the right side, you're on the right team. Make sure you're, as the Americans say, get right with God. You know? Because one thing I do believe, I believe they will start building this temple. They already know where they're going to put it. I think they have started building it already, laying foundations and things. And, you know what I mean? These people, they can fake prophecy. They've done it so many times. So the whole world's just going to go with that, whatever they fake. You know, so we know what we're waiting for. And we know when it's our time. And then everything from there, we know we just got to be about our Father's business and I was reading every day basically, but I just took a break because I got into Isaiah, and I just got stuck, and I was like, you know what? Let me quickly finish this book so I can get back to the prophets, because it just lets us know, after everything that's happened, after all we've been through, and this is what I can't understand with the slumber bruise, is that after everything that's happened, the mistakes that are made, all we have to do is come back to the law, statutes, and commandments. It's like, is it that hard? Is it that hard? You don't have to be perfect. Just start working. Start changing. Start sacrificing. Start putting things away. Start honoring the Sabbath. Because we can't change who we are. And like I said, it's really hard for the nations, the Gentiles, to realize what's really going on and what's really going to happen. I understand that. And also, but what is the most important thing is that we have to give them time, because it's not easy to accept. It wasn't easy for us to accept who we are, what we did, how we turned away from our God, who we were supposed to be. We were supposed to be that example. And then we handed over our king to the Romans. That's hard to accept. That's really hard to accept. And to be honest, for a lot of our people, they've come to this for the promises. I didn't find out about the promises until I was like a year in. So if it weren't for the promises, if it weren't for the kingdom, how many of us would be able to accept how rotten we are and how we killed Jesus? We handed him over. And how some of our ways were even worse than the heathens. That's what we have to think about when it comes to the Gentiles. Nobody wants you. We don't want your car. We don't want your house. I don't want you to bow at my feet. I don't want you to beg or nothing, none of that. But the truth's going to come out. It will. And the question is, will you fall away? And this book says everything's going to be nice, it's going to be beautiful, everyone's involved, everything is delicate. There's no blood and guts in this thing, right? But there is in the book. So when stuff gets real, and we're out of here, or we're in the land, and everybody's coming to attack us in our homeland, what are you going to do? Who are you going to be? Where are you going to be? That's the big question for you. And for the rest, people who don't want to know about this, and they're of the blood, they're the house of Israel, going to be very difficult for you, because the Most High is merciful, you know. It's merciful. So he's going to give you a chance. You didn't think there was rotten people who came out of Egypt. He's going to give you a chance. And basically, we're going to be scared of you. We ain't going to want to be around you. It's like in Avatar, where Jake Sully, he loses his group and he's just ran from the big tiger thing. And now Natiri's found him, and she decides to bring him back to her tribe, because the little buds gave her a sign and they fell on Jake. And she's like telling him, you're like a baby, you don't know what to do, the forest is after you, like, you don't know what to do, you're like a baby. That's what it's going to be like for us with you guys. We don't want to have to be arguing with you and telling you off and telling you not to do that and not to do this and to stop saying that and not to complain. And don't you dare light that cigarette, and don't be sneaking off to do this. Because we're just going to leave you to it. You're going to feel so lost, because by then you're going to have seen so many crazy things. You're going to know that this Bible is true. You're going to know. Everyone is, except for the people who know they're doomed. They're going to deny it all the way. They're going to be gnashing their teeth. They're going to be angry. And you can see it already. You can see it already. You know who these people are. Every believer knows who these people are. And this book describes like people can just come and join at the last minute. Anyone can just come and join. And it's like, really? Not quite. I don't see it happening that way. The scriptures don't describe it that way. You're not going to be main characters, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. You're not going to be tribal judges. You're not going to be tribal leaders. You're not going to be 144,000. If you've just decided to... It's possible. It's possible. But not likely. Not likely. Who knows? Who knows? Like, my mind, like I said, my mind isn't closed on these things, but this book's getting deeper now. And it does get bad, but it doesn't get as bad as what the Bible says.